I'm delighted that you have a show because you're fresh, you're funny, you're great. And I want you to know something. From my heart, I never liked you.
Don Rickles was unlike any other comedian in Hollywood. He had a special talent for making the biggest stars laugh one moment and cringe the next. His jokes were quick and sharp, and his memory was even sharper. While he roasted everyone who crossed his path, not everyone was willing to forgive him afterward. Behind all the laughter and applause, some of comedy's most famous names walked away feeling hurt, holding grudges, and carrying unfinished business. The real story of what happened when the cameras stopped rolling reveals which comedy legends Don Rickles targeted in ways that shocked everyone. Don Rickles didn't begin his career as the comedy icon people remember today. His first attempts in show business had nothing to do with making people laugh. He actually trained to be a serious dramatic actor and spent years trying out for serious roles in movies and television shows. Despite having real talent, the opportunities just weren't there for him. Casting directors kept passing him over, and by the early 1950s, it became obvious that if he wanted to stay in the entertainment business, he needed to change direction completely. This major change didn't happen on a movie set or television studio. Instead, it came from the nightclubs of New York and Miami, where Rickles started experimenting with stand-up comedy just to pay his bills. But it didn't take him long to figure out that telling prepared jokes from a script wasn't working for him at all. The real turning point came when he started responding to people in the audience who were heckling him. Instead of getting frustrated or angry, he began firing back with improvised comebacks that got huge laughs from everyone else. This raw, spontaneous style of insulting people became his trademark, and it worked incredibly well. Audiences loved the shock of it all, the brutal honesty, and the fact that absolutely no one wapque as safe from his attacks. It didn't matter if you were just sitting in the front row minding your own business, or if you were a major celebrity. Rickles had something cutting to say, and he said it without any hesitation whatsoever. In one interview, when someone asked him how he discovered this unique comedy style, Rickles explained that the insult approach started because he didn't really have a proper act. Many years earlier, he would stand on stage telling bad jokes and doing impressions that nobody paid attention to. So he had to find something that would actually get people to look up and pay attention to him. Rickles completely embraced this style that would define his entire career. It was a massive shift from his original dream of being a serious actor to becoming someone who provoked people through comedy. He wasn't just insulting the audience members either. He insulted everyone, including himself, his friends, celebrities, and eventually the biggest names in the entire entertainment industry. What made Rickles different from other comedians was his amazing ability to offend people without completely alienating them. His insults were brutal and cutting, but they came with a wink and a punchline that somehow softened the blow just enough. Still, it was an incredibly risky style to build a career on. In those early days, many nightclub owners weren't sure what to make of him or his approach. But one person who absolutely understood what Rickles was doing was Frank Sinatra. And Sinatra was the man who changed everything for Rickles' career. In the late 1950s, Sinatra came to see Rickles perform at a club in Miami. Rickles, who was always completely fearless, looked Sinatra straight in the eye and said something that could have ended his career right there. Instead of walking out in anger, Sinatra burst out laughing and kept coming back to see more shows. Sinatra started bringing his celebrity friends to watch Rickles perform. Within just a few months, Rickles was performing in front of crowds filled with A-list stars in Las Vegas. Just like that, he had become a headliner in one of the most competitive entertainment markets in the world. Las Vegas wasn't just another venue for Rickles, it became his kingdom. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Rickles was a permanent fixture at the casinos, playing sold-out shows night after night. His performances were part comedy show, part roast session, and completely spectacular entertainment. The more famous someone in the audience was, the more savage his insults became. Absolutely no one was off limits, and the more outrageous he got, the more people wanted to buy tickets to see him perform. By the mid-1960s, Rickles had also become a regular face on television. His big break came through guest appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, where he appeared more than 100 times over the years. Carson loved having him on the show, and viewers loved watching him. He also became a favorite of Dean Martin, joining the now legendary Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts, where Rickles would steal the spotlight with his fearless attacks on everyone, from politicians like Ronald Reagan to beloved stars like Lucille Ball. Even the other comedians on stage, many of them legends in their own right, looked genuinely nervous when Rickles stepped up to the microphone. That's just how sharp and unpredictable he was. Rickles also found steady work in movies. His earliest notable role came in a 1958 submarine drama called Run Silent, Run Deep, starring Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster. Even though it was a serious dramatic role, Rickles managed to stand out. He later appeared in the 1970 war comedy Keith, Ellie's Heroes alongside Clint Eastwood, and decades later in Martin Scorsese's crime epic Casino, where he played a character based on a real-life casino executive. This role showed a completely different side of Rickles and reminded people that underneath all the wisecracks, he was still a trained actor with real dramatic skills. However, despite decades of incredible success and popularity, Rickles didn't receive major awards until very late in his life. It wasn't until HBO released a documentary called Mr. Warm, Mr. Warm, The Don Rickles Project, that captured both his genius and his lasting impact on comedy, that he finally earned his first Primetime Emmy Award and widespread recognition as one of comedy's true pioneers. But Rickles' rise to fame wasn't without serious obstacles and challenges. His early years were filled with rejection after rejection, and even after he became famous, his unique brand of insult comedy came with real consequences and controversies that followed him throughout his career. While his fans saw him as an absolute legend, others accused him of being outdated, offensive, or even harmful to society. Rickles often had to navigate a cultural landscape that didn't always embrace the shock value humor he had helped create and perfect. Behind his sharp-tongued stage persona and sold-out performances, Rickles was also known for having very strong opinions about other people in the entertainment industry. Over the years, there were several famous names that Rickles publicly or privately criticized, or perhaps even genuinely disliked. Some of these names would definitely shock people who only knew his public image. Don Rickles didn't just flirt with controversy, he built his entire career on it. Long before terms like cancel culture or political correctness became part of everyday conversation, Rickles was saying the kinds of things on stage that would make even modern shock comedians think twice. But that was simply his style, and he never made any apologies for it whatsoever. He would stand on stage and take aim at race, religion, gender, nationality, and social status, all within a single performance. And somehow people kept laughing, buying tickets, packing casinos, and inviting him to roast some of the most powerful and influential figures in the world. At the heart of his humor was the firm belief that absolutely nothing and no one should be off-limits when it came to comedy. This approach included celebrities, politicians, and complete strangers sitting in the audience. He would call out someone in the crowd and hit them with a joke regardless of their social status, race, or background. Some of his comments could definitely be called racially insensitive by today's standards. In one of his more infamous bits, he made crude, stereotypical comments about Italian people that got big laughs in nightclubs but would be considered completely unacceptable today. It wasn't just other ethnicities he made fun of either. Rickles, who was Jewish himself, often made offensive comments about his own background and heritage. The key to his approach, according to him, was to insult absolutely everyone equally. That way, it didn't feel personal or targeted at any specific group. Rickles always claimed that his intent wasn't to spread malice or hatred, but rather to highlight absurdity. He leaned into stereotypes not because he actually believed them, but because mocking them so openly and obviously made them sound completely ridiculous. It was his way of diffusing social tension through humor, even if not everyone understood or appreciated this approach. Still, not everyone was laughing at his material. As society began to shift and change, especially from the 1990s onward, many people started to look back at Rickles' older material with a much more critical eye. What had once been considered edgy or bold was now being examined as potentially offensive or completely outdated. Some specific moments drew particular backlash from critics and audiences. In 2012, at a TV Land Awards ceremony, Rickles made a joke about President Barack Obama that many people found inappropriate and racially charged. While Rickles had made a career out of insulting every American president he had ever encountered, this particular joke didn't land the same way with audiences. Many people called it racially offensive, and Rickles' publicity team was forced to address the criticism by insisting that he was simply being himself and meant no real harm. Despite all the controversy that sometimes surrounded his material, if there was one place where Rickles' roast style always seemed to work perfectly, it was when he performed for political audiences. He was actually invited to roast Ronald Reagan at the president's second inaugural celebration in 1985, which put his completely unapologetic style in front of some of the most powerful people in America. Standing in front of the president, vice president, first lady, and dozens of important government officials, Rickles delivered his performance with the same fearless energy he brought to Las Vegas stages. That was the strange and unique power Rickles possessed. He could say things that looked wildly inappropriate when written down on paper, but when he delivered them with his signature smirk and commanding stage presence, they somehow worked. It was almost like he had a special pass that allowed him to get away with material that would destroy other comedians' careers. Throughout his career, Rickles had complex relationships with many of his fellow comedians. Some loved him, some feared him, and others had complicated feelings about his approach to comedy. His relationship with Johnny Carson was particularly interesting because it combined genuine friendship with occasional behind-the-scenes tension. Rickles appeared on The Tonight Show more than 100 times, often showing up unannounced and sometimes even interrupting interviews with other guests. Carson usually welcomed these interruptions because he understood that Rickles could turn any situation into television gold. Their comedic rhythm was unmistakable, with Rickles playing the aggressive jokester and Carson playing the amused straight man who let the insults roll off his shoulders. However, not every moment between them was carefully planned or rehearsed. In 1976, while Carson was away from the show, Rickles was guest hosting and accidentally broke Carson's beloved cigarette box that sat on the host's desk. When Carson returned and discovered the damage, he walked across the NBC studio lot, interrupted the taping of Rickles' sitcom, and confronted him on camera. This moment became a piece of late-night television legend that was replayed for decades. Despite their public friendship, there were persistent rumors that not everything between them was completely cordial behind the scenes. Some industry speculation suggested that Rickles may have been privately frustrated about being passed over for hosting opportunities, including The Tonight Show itself, when Jack Paar stepped down in the early 1960s. Whether these rumors were true or not, any tension never showed during their on-air appearances together. When Jay Leno took over The Tonight Show in 1992, Rickles remained a frequent guest, but the dynamic between them never quite matched the easy rapport he had enjoyed with Carson. While his appearances remained regular, the tone was noticeably different. Rickles often used his time on Leno's show to mock the host to his face, making jokes about his delivery, his appearance, and even complaining about being made to wait backstage. The audience would laugh, and Leno would play along professionally, but many long-time fans could sense an underlying tension. Leno maintained his composure, but Rickles never hesitated to point out what he saw as the more corporate or sanitized version of The Tonight Show under Leno's leadership. Where Carson had maintained a certain looseness that gave Rickles room to dominate segments with his wild energy, Leno's more structured approach didn't always provide the same space for Rickles to roam freely. Rickles also had interesting dynamics with other comedy legends of his era. His relationship with Bob Hope represented a fascinating generational clash. Hope was already an established institution when Rickles was rising, known for his carefully scripted monologues and broad appeal. Rickles thrived on chaos and spontaneity, which put him in direct contrast to Hope's polished approach. During the Dean Martin celebrity roasts, Rickles took full advantage of the format to target Hope's carefully maintained public image. He mocked Hope's reliance on cue cards, his dated material, and his constant need for audience approval. The attacks were relentless, but delivered with such precision that even Hope had to laugh along. With Joan Rivers, Rickles found someone who could match his speed and sharpness. When they appeared together on talk shows, their exchanges were fast and cutting, with neither comedian pulling any punches. Rivers was one of the few people who could take Rickles' insults and fire them right back, often even louder and more aggressively. Red Skelton represented everything Rickles' comedy was not. Skelton's warm, sentimental style, based on gentle character work, was the complete opposite of Rickles' speed and sting approach. While there was no confirmed hostility between them, Rickles occasionally made comments about comedians who were afraid to hurt people's feelings, which many took as veiled criticism of performers like Skelton. Lenny Bruce and Rickles emerged in the same era, but took completely different approaches to pushing comedy boundaries. Bruce focused on social consciousness and political commentary, often landing in courtrooms as much as on stages. Rickles' material wasn't political at all. It was purely personal and built around direct confrontation with whoever happened to be in front of him. Later in his career, Howard Stern became one of Rickles' harshest critics, dismissing his style as outdated during various radio segments. Stern framed Rickles as a relic of another era whose rapid-fire insults didn't work in the modern media landscape. Rickles never responded publicly to these criticisms, which spoke to both his professionalism and his confidence in his own legacy. When Don Rickles passed away in 2017, even his critics acknowledged his massive impact on comedy. He had spent decades walking a razor-thin line between humor and offense, somehow managing to insult everyone while still being invited back again and again. His unique ability to make people laugh at themselves and others, even when it hurt, created a comedy legacy that influenced countless performers who came after him. Rickles proved that comedy could be both brutal and joyful, that audiences would pay to be insulted if it was done with enough skill and charisma. He never apologized for his approach, never softened his delivery to match changing times, and never lost the respect of his peers, even when they disagreed with his methods. In the end, Don Rickles remained exactly what he had always been, a one-of-a-kind performer who made everyone laugh, even when they didn't want to.